You're listening to the Smith House Adventure Show. Hello and welcome to the show. Today's guest is Cope Wilson, Cowboy, Special Operations Soldier, Anti-Poaching Ranger in Africa. Cope, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with a little bit of your early life. Where did you grow up with, and how did you kind of follow into the path of soldier and cowboy?
I was born in Pembroke, actually, which is like kind of next to where Petawawa was at, Ontario. My dad was in, so were both my grandpas. I come from a long line of veterans, you know, a bunch of guys when the balloon would go up in Korea, World War II or whatever, like the men in my family bloodline would down tools and go fight the Nazis or the whoever's, right? And it just, growing up around it with my folks, it was a really natural sort of progression, and had uncles, and those are the kind of guys that were in it. Yeah, so that's where it started for me. And both my brother and I served. My brother is still a current serving member.
Okay, so it's just, that was kind of, it's been in the blood for you, eh?
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like people who grow up and their dad is big in the logging industry or a miner or whatever. They just kind of usually end up falling in on that kind of stuff just because they've been exposed to it. And without trying to give my dad a hard time, basic training started for me at a young age, like well before I ever put on a uniform, because my dad was a pretty strict guy. And I naturally did really well in the military. After that first initial kind of time frame, my folks proposed to Germany. And so I spent most of my first 5 years or so over there. And my dad got out in 93. I forget how old I was, but it was maybe about, I think I would have been 10. And then I joined on, I went down to the recruiting station on early afternoon on September 11th, 2001. After the Twin Towers fell. That was my, at that time I was 16, had to get parental consent and stuff like that, but that's what started my road.
Okay, and then so 9/11 happens. What unit did you initially join, because you were still underage? Yeah,
so with parental consent and with the kind of promise, you need to have grade 10 to get into the Reg Force, but I was already in high school. My dad wanted me to go to college, so he allowed me to go away to basic training for the reserves when I was, for the first 6 years or so of my service. So I had to finish high school for a couple of years, took a gap year off, did leave without pay, hitchhiked across Australia just because I was a bit of a kind of mix between like warrior hippie kind of thing. Didn't do that well in university. I mean, I played really good rugby, but I was just really not that engaged. I hadn't had the chance to deploy. I didn't feel like I was kind of living up to my potential from a uniform standpoint. And I wasn't a very good academic at that time. So halfway through second year, I ran out of money, and I found they were giving a lot of money to go away to Afghanistan. I was like, yeah, I'll try some of that. And I found myself driving by the Bala Hissar in Kabul at about, I think my first tour was, I was 21. I turned 21 on my first tour. And I was with the Royal New Brunswick Regiment, and I was attached to the National Support Element Detachment Kabul in Task Force 107. I got over there just after New Year's in 2007.
Okay, and so what was on your first tour? What were you doing on that tour?
I was honestly trying to get to Kandahar because I wanted to get into the scrap, because Canada had it's kind of insane, right? That like, despite the size of our military, we had this huge chunk of one of the most dangerous provinces in all of Afghanistan for a very long time. Like all kinds of popular compliments from other warfighting nations, the Americans and the Brits and the Aussies, right? We're the Four Eyes community. They were like, we were really weren't sure what we were going to get when Canada came over here, but we gave them Kandahar, and those boys, and no joke, like, this British guy's like, you guys can fucking scrap. It was really cool. Like, no one who ever fought in the GWOT can't say that Canadians aren't savage warriors. At the time I was trying to get down there, but because I was just kind of moved into the debt, I didn't do a year long of build-up training like everybody else in the reserves did, because apparently they thought we were useless. And I was dating a girl at the time who actually we were engaged, and she was in Kandahar. That was a huge impetus for me to try and get down there. I was a gunner, driver, deck commander at the ripe old age. At 21 as a Master Corporal E5. I got promoted to Master Jack really fast in the reserves, and I was able to keep that rank throughout my career. I didn't have to go back. I think I went back to Corporal for 6 months when I went about less than 6 months when I went Red Force, and I went right back up.
Okay, so you did your tour kind of early on, and obviously it kept you going so that you pursued going into the special operations community. What was it that you found either on the tour or in the military that you're like, I'm going to keep doing this, but I want to go up to a level where, you know, you don't get just to slack around, but you got to start kind of earning your way in that unit kind of almost constantly?
Yeah, it was so. I had grown up with like a bit of a romantic view of what it was to be like a Navy SEAL or a British SAS guy and all this stuff. And I remember seeing these guys in books with like painted guns and those big long outfits they would wear, like in Gulf War I when the 22nd SAS was doing all this crazy mobility stuff. I remember reading books by Navy SEALs when I was on the school bus when I was a teenager and those kinds of things. And I was like, that's for me kind of thing. But I never met any of these guys because JTF2 in Canada was like, you never really saw them. You know, I was a reservist Master Jack teaching at the infantry school and for a while before, you know, kind of committing to the SF community. I would go to the briefings and stuff like that, and I thought they were kind of crappy. And at that time, like CSOR, the Canadian Special Operations Regiment, wasn't even a thing. Like it was like rumblings, this rumor, like, hey, they're starting up a new unit. We should go. And I'm talking with some of my other like fit, motivated buddies in like the barracks in Gagetown, and but nobody had any information on it. It was so new, right? And one of the reasons why I wanted to do some recruiting trips when I was later a seasoned and like veteran operator was because I thought the recruiting job, like the recruiting sessions that I attended, were kind of crappy. And so I was like, I can do a better job than that guy. But when I was on my first combat tour, Prime Minister Harper at the time was going to come to Kabul and do a visit. And they sent a bunch of the JTF2 guys over there because CSOR was just stood up. They had not even conducted a tour yet, I don't think, at that time. They were less than 6 months old. All the initial operators were still in training by, you know, other members of the CANSOF community. And I remember these guys rolled into camp and they got long hair and they got beards and they're covered in tattoos. They call each other by their first name. They're driving Suburbans in Afghanistan with Ontario plates and painted guns. And I was like, what? Fuck? You know, I was just like, that's cool. Like, not cool as in like, I want to paint a gun and cool hair. It was like, I like these guys operate. They give each other shit. They call each other on their baloney, but they actually like loved and cared for each other. It wasn't like boot bands and helmet straps and get over here, Master Wilson, like that kind of bullshit. It was like, yo, you know what you got to do. You know, it was just a very mature place to work. And I started my selection process while I was on deployment. I did my fitness tests, all the baseline fitness articles you got to put in to submit your packet. I did all those on camp. I did my BFT around the camp, being proctored by a guy in a truck driving behind me. And I did my swim test in the Canadian Embassy in Kabul. But it was like, which is not a suitable standard pool to do the thing in, but yeah. When I saw that, I was immediately enamored. I felt that I got along with them. Like we have a very small number of our Canadians on that camp. And so when these guys came in, they basically moved into our building with them. So you're like eating next to them, like, so what do you do? And like that kind of thing. I remember flying. This is actually kind of a cool story. The first commanding officer's name was Jamie Hammond. And I think I was flying out for HLTA or something. I was going to meet my fiance in Thailand, and I'm on the Herc to go from Kabul to Kandahar. And there's a bunch of these guys in like plate carriers and golf shirts. And you don't know who the hell they are. They could be Canadian, they could be whatever, right? And this guy's taking if you've ever been on a Herc, have you ever been on a Herc and had to take a piss? They have like a little like thing. They have like a little tube, like a piss tube. And there's a guy, he's standing there taking a pee. And I was like, I tap him on the shoulder. And he's like, yeah, what's up? I was like, excuse me, how do I get your job? And he's like, well, you just apply. And I was like, well, what would I be applying for? And he told me the Canadian Special Operations Regiment. I was like, oh, well, who runs that? And he's like, well, I do. I'm Jamie. And he shakes my hand. The CO shakes my hand. He introduced himself by his first name. I thought that culture was really neat. Yeah.
That's interesting. So it was almost kind of a right away thing. You're like, I see that. I love that mentality, mindset. And even on your tour, you're starting it. Once you get back home, how long before your package goes through or you're able to start selection?
So yeah, I was able. So I got home in the early fall of 2007, and you're supposed to once like my package. I already even applied, and I already got my selection date when I was on deployment. But I lied to the CSOR operations people, telling them that my post-deployment leave, which is supposed to be pretty significant, was yeah, I'm good to go. Like I did my leave, I came home, whatever. I made up some bullshit story, and because I was home, I want to say, so I landed back in Gagetown. I got married about a week later, and then we packed up all our crap in a U-Haul, drove, got a place, and I was on selection within about 5 days after that. Like I was still jet lagged showing up on selection from my deployment.
Wow.
And the thing about selection was it's a lot different now. So the things that I did, we no longer do, I keep saying they no longer do. And so obviously there's secrets about it, but like, honestly, it's like selection's like a kick in the nuts. Like, doesn't matter if you know it's coming, you still got to do it. And so I liked selection so much, I did it 1.5 times because I washed out halfway through my first one with a medical injury. And so it was very fast from coming home from that war to that first trip over to going on selection.
Now, with that quick turnaround, do you think now looking back that might have caused your injury halfway through selection, like whether stuff overseas, whatever, and maybe if you had a bit of a transition, you might have done better? Or was it just an injury that was going to happen because selection is so hard on the body that it's going to break you down no matter what?
Yeah. So one of the things that was specific about that particular selection was that it was conducted in like late September, November timeframe, and it was 21 days all inclusive with 17 days of assessment. We used to call it individual selection and assessment phase. We call it something different now. I keep saying we. I'm not in anymore. God, I've been out for 4 years, and I'm like we like they. So that was actually a bit of a playing field leveler, doing it in the snow and that kind of thing. Very, very cold temps. And then the next time I did it was in May. I was in great shape because I've always been a bit of I'm a social guy, man. I like going out and having my beer and stuff like that. But like when I got in selection mode on tour, there was no alcohol. I ate clean. I was driving and doing my daily Army guy job. And I was in the gym twice a day, really dedicated to that. When I got home, I was fit, but I believe in, and this is something for anybody that's watching this that wants to go to these units or anything like that. Like you can, the only control you have in your preparation for that process is however long is before you start your training until you show up on selection. Because after that, all your control is removed. So if you take yourself a year, if you take yourself 6 months, if you only give yourself 4 weeks, that's your only control you have. Because after that, it's on them. And I'm also a huge fan of specificity or functional training. So like I would be that guy, that jerk, the loser looking guy in Gagetown on the soccer field, like running with a jerry can in one hand, a gas mask on, and my rucksack, like doing timed intervals along the track or the sports field or whatever. That wasn't specific to training enough. And what I didn't do enough of was water training. I didn't wash out in the water, but when I had some time off after I tanked selection, I had made enough of an impression that they gave me a job as a supporter at the regiment for a period of about 6 months before the next selection started. So I was in the culture, learning, and I was able to see what kind of training you guys are doing because I wasn't allowed to observe the rest of selection, but I could see where other guys had tanked. I was talking to some, and some of these other guys got offered the same thing. And the most functional thing that I did that helped me in my journey was a training in open water, like open water swim training. And I would run because we went down to California to do some training while they were on course. And I would run about 3 miles with a gas mask, helmet, rucksack, jerry can, blue gun, plate carrier down to a swimming pool. And I would tread water and I would do it every day for 60 days. And I would add a minute of water treading each time to the point where I was treading water for up to 45, 60 minutes. And that playing field level of more water training gave me the cardio and the injury prevention because a lot of cardio stuff is very dynamic, or at least it was back then. This is before ellipticals were cool, So, but that getting a good thumper and then lower body endurance and core. Other than that, man, like you got to do the push-ups, you got to do the pull-ups, but like you got to be able to walk. You got to be able to walk and stay awake and think.
Without getting too much into it, for your selection, was there a part that maybe, like you were kind of saying there, that you overtrained or you undertrained in things, and it really kind of opened your eye to be like, oh man, I didn't even think of doing that, or I overdid maybe some of the dynamic training and your knees or something, you felt it. Is there kind of like now that, going through it, I guess the a better way you would have gone through it on your first time?
I don't think I could have done. Well, I mean, I don't think I could have done it any other way, really. And another thing that I did do is I took because you're not going to lose much level of fitness in a month. I read in this SAS book years ago that there were a bunch of guys on successful SAS selections in the 80s, which are different, vastly different from ours. I keep doing that. Some of those guys would take 30 consecutive days off of training. And that was not because you're not going to get any less fit really in 30 days. And if you do, it's going to come back out and the next, you're not going to suffer for very long. But what you will do is it'll heal up any micro injuries that you don't even probably notice that you're getting. Because I heard actually one of the guys I was on selection with, he's got a business where he was doing potential operator like preparation courses, is that there's no such thing as overtraining, but there is such thing as under recovery. I'm also not a fit guy. Like, I'm not one of those nerds who knows his macros and all that shit. Honestly, there are guys out there that were like that. And a lot of those guys tanked. Like, I remember standing on like day 5 and there's 2 dudes next to me and they're huge 6'5" DAC guys, 6 packs, the whole 9. And they didn't make it. And I was a short 5'8", 200-pound potbelly dude. I just had heart. I got through on like Copenhagen and hate. And that was me, man. I've never been a fit. And actually, any of the other operator guys you ever bump into, they will tell you that there was a period of time, a significant period of time, if not my entire time there, where I was the fattest, least fit operator in the body. Ever. Like that. But I had heart. I just had heart. That was it.
And I think at the end of the day, that's it. You can have, like you said, those fit dudes that monitored absolutely everything, but they were missing that little bit something that said, nah, keep going when the suck gets that much worse.
Yeah, and they're also like when guys are that dialed in with their training, they're also training their body to not do things like get 8 hours of sleep. If they're like, congratulations, dude, now you're sleeping 4 hours at different 4-hour intervals in a 24-hour and a 48-hour period, and all you have to go on is an MRE. You're not getting nutrition. You're not getting you get fed really good there. When you get fed really good, but like there's so many other aspects of it that you can't control, and part of being an elite athlete is having intense control and discipline. And then for the purpose of executing, say you're an NHL player, you're whatever. This was like, you got to there's elements you got to be like, I'll never call myself tough because I'm not, but you got to be tough. Like I've always maintained, I'm going to swear, and it's not a cool word now in today's woke culture, but it's true. Selection serves 2 purposes. One, to make sure you're not a fucking pussy. And the other one is to make sure that you're not fucking retarded. That's it. Like that's basically it.
Mm-hmm. What was the biggest eye opener for you on selection that you found your second one when you didn't have the injury? Yeah. Like that you found like, wow, this is my level. Like I push so much harder. What kind of area did you not believe in yourself in as much? And then once you got pushed that you're like, oh, my water or climbing up hills or certain things, what did you kind of learn about yourself during selection?
I guess I had previous to that, I was mostly a class B, whatever, like reservist working in training schools across Eastern Canada. So I worked a lot in Gagetown. I was teaching basic infantry. I was teaching soldier qual. I never really taught BMQ because I was more of they would pick me to teach field drills, small unit tactics, firearms, stuff like that. And one of the things, in that, I didn't have a lot of exposure attached to like a regular force rifle company. I was a young guy. I was very young, and I was very inexperienced. I had one tour, that was it. But what I did have was a lot of book knowledge of like firearms, PAMs, and drills and stuff like that. And then when I'm exposed to guys who are like, this guy's been the unit master sniper at 3VP for like 5 years, and he doesn't know how to run a fucking C6 machine gun according to the drills. And so like, dude, you're doing that wrong. And they're like, fuck off, new guy, And I was like, okay, like whatever. And I knew my basic drills, and and by basic, I knew the basics. And that's all being an SF guy is, man. It's just a mastery of the basics and knowing which corners you can cut and when, and which corners you can never cut. And so that was a thing that really surprised me, that like beyond my fitness and all these other things, I could gel with a team, and I knew my basic soldier shit, even as a reservist that just only ever did it in practice for the most part.
Okay. And once you get done your selection and then you go into the regiment, what was some of the cool training that you got now exposed to that you're like that surreal moment of like, I can't believe I am doing this right now. Like, this is insane.
Yeah, yeah. there was some of that. Like the training starts off pretty slow. It's like a week of comms and a week of like medical stuff and a week of, these kinds of things. And then we would go to a third location training venue where they taught us how to drive really fucking fast and shoot like from the vehicle. And then you do it again at night and you're like pit maneuvering guys out like a cop car thing. It was like super counter terror, really fucking cool. And then when we started integrating use of interior door charge breaching explosives into live fire CQV, where like I'm looking at myself at that time, I was like 22. I was around my 23rd birthday. And I was like, I couldn't believe that we're doing this. And there's also moments when like as a guy who was very experienced in a training environment as a young reservist, like I knew how to teach. I knew how to do lesson plans and teach things, and I knew what training safety stuff needed to be met in order for certain gateways to be pushed through in a training environment at the individual section platoon level. We also belonged to an army at the time that made you put on your eye protection to strip the extractor of the C6 machine gun because it was spring loaded and you might get hurt. Very, very safety oriented, right? And now we're throwing grenades with no like it's safe. Like it's not safe. But like we had the privilege to operate under a different level of training safety, which for me was like kind of fucking mind blowing. And there were other elements too, where like some of the insert extract stuff where you're on a helicopter and you got a fast rope or rappel in. Like there are very, very few safety like gateways that need to be met in order for that training to take place. And the only thing that's holding you from dying is like your grip strength hanging off the edge of a fucking helicopter at 80 knots. And like that was like for me, I was like, this is like. If I said it to myself or even the boys, like this is fucking sketchy. Like if I said it once, I said it 100 times. Yeah, but also culturally, like here's these guys who are like balaclavas and are like all cool and shit. We were also a pack of retard nerds because all those guys, like everybody's got their little thing. Like you'd be amazed at how many operators are obsessed with Star Wars, or how many like, oh man, it's nuts. Like there's the gym jocks, and it's kind of like high school. Like there's the nerds that are into like the biggest nerds are the snipers. Like these guys go home on Friday night and instead of going to the bar, they're like memorizing ballistic calcs and watching YouTube videos for like new Kestrel light emitters. Just like they geek out hard, like they're geeks. I shouldn't say nerds. I should say geeks. They find their thing and they love it. And that was something the regiment was excellent at. After I finished all my training, and I got like, here's your tan beret, here's your tomahawk, you're an operator. Don't fuck it up. We went on post-course leave and deployed right away. It was neat because that basically, for the most part, that package, which was 3 SOC, which was now 3 squadron. I think they still have a 3 squadron. We went downrange. Now we're doing all the shit that we were doing in training like literally a couple months ago. And now we're doing it live against Taliban. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. And you get to see the evolution of the brohood through the hardship. And how, anyway, it was a magical formative experience, core memory for me as a guy.
Yeah, I can believe that you're now kind of in a community where everyone has their nerdy, geeky little things too. But when it's time to operate, it's time to put on the big boy pants and, go do it. You're with some of the best dudes that, Canada can produce. And you're getting to, I guess, just gel the way some guys kind of just need to, right? Like it's that you've got a wild man to the left and to the right of you. You're going into chaos and danger that's in front. And you kind of have this cool kind of moment where you're, not to say you're not worried or those things there, but there's an extreme level of confidence that you just have with your abilities and the abilities that you can trust those around you. That has to just make a very tight community.
Yeah.
The way I see it is, in a battalion or anything like that, there are people there that they're kind of just collecting the paycheck. Yeah, they're going through the infantry role, but they don't have the same heart in it as like the other guys do. But when you get into the level that you're at, there is none of that half-assing it. Everyone's going to put that effort into it. With that, what was on operation now with CSOR? How has how is it different than you're on your tour, your first tour, right? Like how is just that mentality, like you were saying too, with training standards where the safety gets to get pushed just that little bit more to get that realistic training happening so that you can be that much more just sharpened and dialed in. What was that difference like between first tour and now your second tour of Seesaw?
Well, it's like I guess one of I'm sure I've never really talked to it about some other guys. Actually, that's a bit of a lie. Every guy that I know, because I now exist. I live in Montana, and most of my buddies are retired U.S. Specialties veterans, and we get to talk. We don't talk about work much, but every operator remembers the first time he met another, like when he was a conventional guy, the first time he met an operator and saw that what they are and what they do, they never forget that. And another time is you'll never forget what it's like to be on, like as a new guy on your first hit, like on your first live direct action or your first operation, like as a new dude. And that was very remarkable. Like another thing, I think this is, I don't want to segue too quickly into the mental health stuff, but mentally there's a barrage of psychological assessments that need to take place before your packet is even green lighted to go. Once you get into your training pipeline, depending on what specialty, like sniper, JTAC, climber, these other things, there's some of them have different other like psychological profiling gateways to get into, say, sniper is different from JTAC. And when you're there, there's something about an operator. This is kind of, maybe call this crazy. There are elements of ego that I possess, right? Like, cool. I enjoyed a position within a regiment of men that are the top 0.001 percentile of all apex predator human beings on the planet. Raj, I try not to let that go to my head, because in my head, I'm like, there's always a part of me that believed I didn't deserve to be there. And that little part, now that little voice crushed me in other areas of my life, especially when I was getting out. But it pushed me when I was in to never stop trying harder, to never like level up, to be the best at this particular thing, or to access, resources to get better at this thing I'm bad at or whatever. So I don't want to segue too much into mental health yet, but that's something I want to kind of go. I want to go down the mental health road, man, because I was medically released for mental health because I couldn't hack it anymore. And that's like, that transition that should be the focus of like maybe another podcast. I don't know, but yeah, operating with these guys next to each other, shoulder to shoulder for the first time. And you're all like, I can't believe they're here. I can't believe that I have the privilege to be picked to be here right now. And I don't want to let any of these guys down.
Yeah. So that seems like a crazy pressure. Is it just one of those things where you're like, oh, I a little bit of that imposter syndrome where you're like, oh, I shouldn't be here. We're getting ready to go. It's going to go. And does it just kind of disappear as soon as you see the lead guy make the move and you just go, okay, now the training is just taken over, muscle memory, and it's almost then when you think about it afterwards, you go, oh, wow, we just did that. Like, do you ever have, like, was it ever like that where the training and everything just took over, that you almost felt that you were a passenger in what was happening because you had been trained to such a level and the muscle memory and everything else that it just happened?
There are elements of times that occurred. However, you'd never so that's, we had a guy in the CQB who was removed from training, who, like, when he was debriefed because he had a bad run in a training CQB environment, he was like, what? The staff were like, what's going on in there, man? And he was like, I don't know. I just kind of go in the door and go on autopilot. And we don't want that. You want guys that, like, the muscle memory that I need to master is not having to look for where my holster is to take up my pistol. That's a no-no. Like, that needs to be automatic. But you never want to not be thinking about what you're doing. And also, like, you can't. So the complex mission sets that we ended up getting, and complex environment that we're operating in, just asymmetrical fucking warfare in Afghanistan, like in a semi-mature theater. Well, at that time I was mature, but like there are problem sets that you can't possibly fathom that are training for, but it's that thinking warrior that takes over. So you're never like on autopilot. Like, there are elements of the muscle memory. Yes, absolutely. The first time I fired my weapon was on my first tour as a reservist, and I was riding near a sentry hatch and fired one out the back at a guy that was coming too close to the convoy. and I picked a Mississippi count. I was like, watch a rock on the side of the road, and I would count Mississippis to this motorbike. And I just, in my head, I was like, as soon as he gets closer than 3 Mississippis, I'm going to put a round off the pavement in front of his motorbike. And the following action was absolutely automatic to the point where it freaked me out. I'm watching him, and I could see a shadow from a post or something, like a light post. And as soon as it hit him, it was inside 3 Mississippis. I rotated the fire selector off, and I put one off the kind of front, like the front left of his motorbike. Gun goes back on safe shoulder check, bolt check, gun. That motion was so automatic that later in bed at night, I was like, holy fuck. And I could have been a dude, that could have been a human, right? But that muscle memory was totally automatic. That was also like elements of like visualization of my training that I got before I even went in the special operations community. We do a lot of visualization training for firearms, a lot of visualization training for parachute emergency procedures, because that stuff needs to be automatic. Like, cause that you got seconds, and so yeah.
Okay. Now, so after your tour and stuff like that, how many tours did you do with CSOR?
So I did 3 combat tours with CSOR, two to so I did my conventional one, 2 to Afghanistan, and then 1 to Iraq. And then there's a bunch of non-combat ones to all over the place. They're training trips to places predominantly Latin America. Because I had a subspecialty that I got myself into a pipeline after that first initial operator tour that I did, that more or less precluded me from a lot of missions, not special missions, but a lot of deployments to Africa. And so I must have been the only operator in the regiment that never did a tour to Africa. And that kind of bothered me. It was also part of the impetus for me to go there upon retirement.
Okay. And actually, speaking of you saying that, what were some of the specialties that you started to get into with CSOR?
So the big ones were climbing. We have guys that they focus a lot on high angle, complex terrain stuff, and that's an incredibly those guys are incredibly good at what they do. They get world class level training, and it's a long pipeline for those guys to go from operator to like assault climber. There's breacher, where you kind of more focus on explosives. There is sniper, obvious. And then there's joint terminal attack control, or JTAC. We have our own pipeline for all of these things, even though breaching and sniping and JTAC stuff exists within the greater CAF sphere. We married up some of that training with some of ours and further specialized to a little bit more proficient and a little bit more kind of our mission centric degree. It's not better. It's just more focused on our mission sets. So, and these pipelines evolved and changed over the years. One of the things the regiment was excellent at was, if you were really passionate about something, like on my first operator tour, our first mission set was a big mobility op. And actually, I'll send you a picture that I took on that mobility op, because it was like car camping with machine guns for weeks, where like it's like a chopped down Humvee with no door or top or armor or none of that shit. It's just machine guns and rucksacks hanging on the outside. It's like car camping with machine guns. Fucking awesome. And I was I've been a redneck, man. I grew up in the woods, did a little bit of ranching and farming for fun. I had horses as a kid and that kind of stuff. And so I liked off-roading. That was one of my things. Once I started getting that sweet operator pay, I started buying cool off-road rigs and stuff. I was never a gun guy. And so they asked if hey, what do you want? Do you want to be the gunner on the truck, or do you want to be the driver? I was like, I want to be the driver. And so I get to off-road for weeks at a time with my buddies in this camping rig. Like, fuck yeah. And the regiment was always good at taking things that guys were already interested in or already had a proclivity for, and kind of keeping them in that role. The subspecialty, to come back to that, I was a JTAC. On that first operator tour, we got in a gunfight, and I'm gonna say something. This is gonna actually. There's a really great rivalry between snipers and JTACs, and we were in the same squadron. We got along, but like it was a very healthy run. We were getting shot at. We were taking a direct fire, and there was a guy standing in a window with an ICOM radio, like a fucking Zach Morris cell phone thing, calling in his fires. And the ground commander said, like, take the shot. And the guy took the shot, and it wasn't a successful shot. This is a way better story in real life over beer, by the way. But He then pivoted to the JTAC, who was like, he said Daryl killed him. And Daryl brought into, like, he didn't even have to say much on the radio, but he was able to whip in these air assets in close proximity to our friendly guys, using a bunch of mental math and knowing where battle space, tracking where all of our guys were, knowing the greater missions picture, and be able to effect on the ground immediately and effectively. And everything was covered down on it. I'm like sitting here as a lowly operator. My job is to watch through this like little porthole. And I'm like, I don't have any bad guys to shoot. I'm kind of pissed off just because they're not in my purview or whatever. And I remember like looking up at Daryl standing on the roof, and I was like, that's the job for me. That one right there. And so when we got home from that deployment, they come into the bay one day, and anybody that wanted to go sniper was already probably going to go there. But nobody wanted to go to JTAC because, one, you work harder, you carry more radios, you're the heaviest guy in the ground force, you're gone more often. It's no extra pay. You're kind of a radio nerd, but you're also cool. It's a fucking nightmare. But you were the queen of battle. It was dope. You were the ground force commander's right-hand man. You had supreme situational awareness. And you walked around. You're kind of a big dick player. And so when they said that, I was like, I'll go JTAC. And all the boys in the bay like moved away from me. They're like, I don't want what he's got, man. He's got cooties or something. And that's when I started in my subspecialty, where I spent the rest of my time as an operator as a JTAC.
That's cool. So has it changed now where more people are kind of interested in it, or does it still have that little bit of I got to carry more radios, got to be a little bit more of the math nerd to make sure, or is it still one of those ones where a select few that want to do it will follow that subspecialty? There
are some guys that really wanted to do it, especially once we started getting a little bit more active in some of the other kind of battle spaces. A lot of guys want to jump in on that kind of stuff. I think one of the reasons why guys didn't want to go down that road was because one of the things that I got with really low, this is going to sound corny, but I got really lonely because there's only one JTAC on a ground force and you're never with your buddies. Like detachment integrity, your 6-man crew dudes you go and do training and stuff with. We didn't do that. Anytime a training event would come up, that I would get kind of farmed out to 2 squadron to go chill. And now I got to make friends again, and they got to trust me and all this other stuff. So you don't really have any buddies, and you're actually not. How do I say this? Some guys just like being a shooter, and that's cool. I wasn't bad at it, but I knew that I was capable of more, and I wanted to do the jobs and be good at the jobs that no one else wanted, because that would make me an asset, and that would get me deployed more.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So when you're doing that, your JTAC, what's involved with that? Like, what does it take to actually become that?
Well,
and for some people, kind of explain what the job is.
So I guess if I were to be talking to someone that has never heard anything about the military, didn't know anything about what a JTAC was, he's a one-on-one guy who goes out on a special operations team anyway. And he goes out and he's an operator first, and then he is responsible for allocation and of air assets, using the weapon systems that are on these air assets to take out targets that are not within range or suitable with organic team weapons. Like there's a guy in this building and we can't shoot him with our guns because they're too small. We got to drop a bomb on it. So there's that whole process. We organize lift, do convoy escort with aircraft, and you're constantly on the road, on the move, next to the boss, running. For me, I ran 3 radios. I ran one that was my inner team net to all my buddies. I ran another one that was like an up and out net to on a higher command level. And then sometimes I would have one for aircraft and or artillery running on 2 channels simultaneously, or an air fires net that was rotary wing. So you're sitting here having a face-to-face conversation with an earbud in, and then Peltors over top that have 2 radios going into those and a boom mic. So you're processing a lot of information. And there's a lot of things where you have to memorize danger close distances for various types of weapon systems for the aircraft that are coming on there. And you're looking at problem sets that you're dealing with in the moment, and then future problem sets that you might run into based on some of the courses of action that the enemy will kind of push you down the road. So it's a fairly cognitive job, and I think there's a degree of autism that I think JTACs need to possess in order to be good at it. And I was pretty good at it. I think I was pretty good at it.
Awesome. What was your favorite thing to call in, either during a training or in real life, where you're like, the little boy came out and like, I am calling in this type of aircraft to blow up that object over there?
I had two experiences that were like, this is my shining moment, Queen of Battle. And one of them was helicopter stuff. I like helicopters, like attack helicopters, like Apaches, Kiowas, and Hueys, and all this stuff, because they operate really low. And normally, those assets, especially the American assets, not to knock the Canadian ones, but my favorite were the American assets that were Marines, because guys that flew these things, like every Marine or rifleman, that's not the case in our Air Force. The Marines have their own self-deployed helicopters, and they know what you're doing. They know your ground plan, and they will like buzz around like angry dragonflies and fuck shit up for you. And just being, not say in control, like I'm a control freak, but being the guy that held the big red button for that. And it was like, I had we call it a stack. It's like various aircraft at various levels, like starting at the top with weird planes that have X designations and stuff, down to gunships and then fighter planes and all this other shit, and Chinooks that are going to pick up ammo and drop off more people or move your guys around. I was at the hammer of all of that. But these helicopter guys, man, they're just, like I said, they're angry dragonflies that kind of buzz around over your head. And they see the problems a lot of times before you do, because that's also their job. And just being the guy that was on that team, it was cool because I got part of be a ground team. And I was like, the guy that got to organize and make very efficient the delivery of weapon systems so that we never really got bogged down. That was one. And one night in Iraq, I don't even know if I can tell this story. I'm going to do it anyways. Fuck it. We spent a bunch of time collecting data on a village that had a bunch of real bad guys in it. And the ROEs were satisfied. All of this was legal. And we were conducting like not denial operations, but we were doing, I guess, to put it in layman's terms, I was green lighted to nuke the whole village. And so I spent all night writing down all these grids for all these buildings. And it's a small town, maybe, 40 some buildings. And it took me a while to dial up and pass up all this targeting data. And I asked for all of this to be delivered in one simultaneous hit. And I was inside of 2 kilometers, and I think it was about 2K. And we had a B-1 Bone bomber call sign check in, and they have a weapons payload capacity of carrying 17 2,000-pound bombs, which are on like a big cylinder, and it'll like drop a bomb and it'll rotate and drop a bomb, and there's 3 bays like that. And they can set up and run a profile so that they can drop at altitude all 17 of these weapons, not at the same time, but in very quick succession. But they will self-retard and fly so that the effect on the ground is simultaneous or near simultaneous. And so I called in 17 2,000-pound bombs within 2 kilometers, and it was like I turned this village. It looked like 2 Transformers had a fight. We just turned this town into a smoking hole on the ground. And I was like standing there with my radio on. I just like that was my moment. That was pretty cool.
It is crazy though, right? Like the power that was at your fingertips, all that work that you did to put in all those target packages, and then boom, it goes.
Yeah. It can happen.
Insane.
All procedurally driven. And if you get good at it, you can do it pretty quick. There's nothing really fast that happens about it. But the longer I did that job for 11 years. And I was fairly good at it. I received some decorations for some actions and stuff like that. I don't want to get into that. I just get really weird when I talk about like the medals and stuff that they gave me and the mentions of dispatches and shit and some of the cool missions, just because like it makes me sound like I'm just an arrogant dick talking about myself. But I will say though that I was pretty good at it. I was pretty good at that job. And there isn't anybody that would watch this, doesn't know me, that wasn't there with me when we were doing it. They'll be like, no man, you shit. I guess we could sidebar to a second how in the soft community, especially here in America, when you go on podcasts, you talk about things like this, you're putting yourself at great risk from ostracizing yourself through the community for one misspoke, like one miscommunicated thing. That's not how it went, man. And so there's a lot of risk, I assume, when I do these things, and I talk about those kinds of specifics because, some guys don't believe that we should ever talk about this stuff. I disagree with that wholly. There's a culture in the Canadian special operations realm where we're ultra professional and don't talk about stuff. And I think that's why there's such a disconnect from the greater Canadian community and the special warriors that they send away to visit violence at night on those who would otherwise get on an airplane and harm our own mom and dad. And that has turned into, yes, those secrets need to be protected so that those guys can do their job and they have the edge on the enemy. so that mom and dad are safe and our sisters and brothers can go to school and they can live a more or less carefree life. But the other side of that coin is the fact that no one knows what we do for the most part. That means they don't have anything to be proud of either. And I think that honestly, like if more Canadians knew a little bit more of what, like the Canadian population knew about what their fighting men and women do, they would have a much greater sense of a pride and appreciation for the men that do it. Like, and yeah. And that's why I don't have too many problems. Like if I lose friends that are still sorting right now saying, hey man, you're not supposed to talk about operations. Like, I mean, okay, man, like, dude, it was fucking 10 years ago. Like, come on. Yeah. But, so that was like a bit of an aside there. Having said that, I'll get back to you about that B-1 bomb thing. We might have to cut that out.
Not a problem. We'll go into that later on.
Okay.
Just blank it all out. And I agree wholeheartedly with you too, right? Like I've talked to two JTF2 guys already. I've talked to you now. And as long as the person that's interviewing doesn't try and probe into the, certain questions that get a little too close into how you do stuff and can kind of mess with certain operational security, I think it's a disservice not to highlight everything that you guys do and push yourselves to, and just the pride that Canadians can have within it. And I think that is a bit of the problem with Canada is we don't show off our military community like the Americans do. And when that happens, and again, it will kind of lead into the mental health that we'll talk about in a bit. But when Canadian population doesn't understand the experiences that people went through, then they don't care about the funding or getting the policies changed that will actually help support those people. So I think it is important to, get these stories out there where, the jokes, the camaraderie. If people have died overseas, then get their stories out there, get their sacrifice out there, that people can start to realize and recognize what it takes to be in the Canadian Forces, and also then what it takes to be within the special operations community, and just how hard it is to get to those levels, maintain those levels. And when a problem happens overseas, that, Canadians can have pride in the fact of, there's a problem happening over there. Don't worry about it. CSOR, JTF2, any of the other, teams and stuff out there, they'll handle it, right? And I think with that disconnect, funding for anything, even for better equipment for you guys, stuff like that. If the population doesn't understand what you do and what you need and why it has to be, as best as it could be, and always looking for that new edge constantly. It can't be like, guys in a battalion where it's like, oh, wow, look at this vehicle here. It's 30 years old and it's being held together with a can of pop that's been duct taped and held together with some paracord to make it all work. So I'm very appreciative for you coming on and, opening up about what you went through. So thank you.
Yeah, no trouble, man. I've got some buddies like Dallas Alexander, for example, is a good friend of mine. And he openly has spoken about some of his experiences. And I think that's good. I think this veil of secrecy that we put over stuff. Yeah, when everything is secret, nothing is secret. Just like when everything is super priority, then nothing is a priority. If everything is pri one, then it doesn't mean anything anymore. If everything is secret or top secret, then it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's been a challenge, man. And me growing in retirement out of that, the way that I left was this is where my personal story gets like on the murky. I want to say, it's on the murky side, as in like it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad because I dedicated my life to that job so much that I was absolutely terrified to lose my identity, which was an operator, which I later learned through a lot of mental health, like a lot of therapy, that's not your identity, bro. That's a job you did. That's not who you are. But I didn't know that. And I was too afraid to lose that designation. And so when I started experiencing a lot of mental health issues, instead of being honest with the good folks who are there to take care of you, but I mean, the military medical system is there to take care of the military first and the patient second. Their job is to get you well enough to get you back in the fight or get you out. That's it. They don't, it'll make you someone else's problem. Now, that's not policy, but that's my experience. That's my lived experience for the last several years of my time in service. I fell into a street drug addiction, a closeted street drug addiction while I was still in uniform. And it wasn't until I found myself chained to a gurney after an attempt at my own life, waking up and seeing my dad there, that I realized that I needed to commit professional suicide or I would commit actual suicide to be successful. And so I walked into the docks one day on drugs. No joke, I was on drugs. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I'm high right now. And they were like, okay. Like, you know, like it got too much, man. And I left it. I left a disgrace and a perceived disgrace. I felt like I was the worst, biggest piece of crap that the regiment had ever had. And like, I was operator of the year in like 2011. And then I went, this is how I go out. What the heck? You know, I remember praying at night on that last combat tour that I take a round in the neck and die in a shit desert country, surrounded by my friends, doing a job I loved like a damn warrior. And it never happened. And I was angry at God for that for a while. Because I was terrified to fall back into that mental health just quagmire when I got home. And yeah, I'm gonna flick a light on that.
No, not a problem.
in front of the sun, in front of the window here, and then the sun started going down. Oh. All right.
Perfect.
Yeah, so that was my experience on the way out, man. And it was pretty rough. It was super rough. I'm surprised I made it.
Now, when you started saying like the street drug stuff like that, was it like just stuff on tours and kind of everything getting to it? Was it the fact like because you made everything about being an operator and that was your identity, did you have anything outside of the unit that you're like, hey, you know what? I'm not training right now. I've got this. Or was it that you made everything about being an operator that's where you started having some of the trouble because you didn't have anything else to reach out to?
A little bit. I suffered a traumatic brain injury in a parachute accident on my advanced parachute course in 2012. And that changed elements of my psyche, like elements, like there's a lot of study now on what TBI does to guys. And it changed, like I had to relearn math and I wasn't my same self anymore. Like I was more or less a straight edge till that accident. I was at about 27 years old. And then everything changed. Like, and going from being a straight edge, not into drugs, I didn't drink hard alcohol. And then I get posted to the city for a year to go to language school. And within 6 weeks, I had started getting like recurring awful nightmares that made me not want to go to bed. And I was like, it was in, you know what I mean? And so I started taking drugs to keep me awake. And then I started taking drugs to help me sleep. And then they were actually prescribing me drugs for all kinds of things. I was dating at the time and they started giving me drugs that were messing with my junk. And now I'm dating these gorgeous women and I got a cool job and I drive a jacked up Jeep. There's no reason why I shouldn't want to like be a man about town. But for some reason I'm with these women and I have no draw to them. Am I depressed? Like my dick doesn't work. Like what the fuck? And so it started to be, it was a real challenge. And I started medicating with, you know, drugs and alcohol and that kind of thing outside of work. I was gone we started tracking days and I was gone about 200 days a year for about 11 years. And so that doesn't leave a lot of time for interpersonal relationships, romantic relationships, doesn't leave a lot of time for hobbies, that kind of thing. The hobbies that I was doing were ones I were already interested in that I would kind of do at work already, like off-road or shoot, that kind of thing. I like to fish and do a bit of hunting, but I never had time to enjoy any of it because I was always gone during the season or something like that. So it really sucked up so much of my life that I had a hard time enjoying hobbies. Being around horses and caring for livestock was one of them. There was a certain peace that I get from those animals. And that's unexplainable. And to this day, like I both work and volunteer, and I'm a board member on a number of veteran equine programs in two countries, both sides of the border. And it's like, honestly, like all the crap I did in the Army, it's cool, but like it's my greatest pride. It's my actual greatest work is what I get to do for other guys now with horses. So yeah.
That's awesome. So you tell your chain of command, all right, I'm high rate now. They start doing your medical release. You talked a little bit about it, but
bless you.
How hard was that transition then? And when did you start finding the horses and the cowboy lifestyle that you've now kind of started moving into?
I don't know if this is a good story to tell. I believe that, like, for one, I'm a proud former member of the Canadian Special Operations Regiment. They do a lot of good for a lot of guys. And when you leave a high-speed unit like that, when you're gone, you're gone. There's like your buddies that you'll always have, but they have other stuff that they're concentrating on. So it's not like I expect the adjutant or the CEO to check in with me. We had an old RSM named Marco. He would still text me a couple years later. Great guy. But I released during COVID, and my last day in service, I got my thanks for coming out to the Army plaque by the Padre in a Tim Hortons parking lot. And I had asked to turn my kit in after hours with the RQ because I was handing over pieces of gear that had literal mine and my buddy's blood, sweat, and tears on that I'd carted around for my 14 years in the regiment. And I actually fell apart. Like I became an emotional mess. Like I'm literally giving away everything that kept me. I'm getting kind of choked now thinking about it. Fuck. And when I left, I got in my truck and I'm going to leave this place because I had, obviously the good times I had there, but the most recent times were not positive experiences with drugs and bad breakups and all these things, and just falling from grace at work was very challenging. And so when I left, I drove out west until I stopped seeing snow. Another thing that bothered me a bit is they released me at 19 years, 360 days of service, and they couldn't give me the extra 5 to make it 20, which whatever. But I'm a little bit crusty about that. Like, come on. But anyway, I drive west till I stop seeing snow. I'd never been to British Columbia before. And so that was basically the Pacific Ocean was where the snow stopped. And especially in January. And I moved in with a great buddy of mine named Toby Miller. He's got a place on the island. And he took me in, man. He was a supporter radio man. And him and I have been brothers for a long, long time. And he suffered an extra. So he suffered a TBI as well. And he had been out for a few years. All of a sudden, my buddies, when I was in the unit, about 90% of my friends were in the serving. 10% were retired. When I retired, all of a sudden, 10% of my buddies were still serving, and 90% of them were retired. Because there's a bunch of guys that know the Veterans Affairs game, and they're further down the retirement trail in their wellness than I was. So now they became my mentor. And if not for them, I don't know if I'd be here either, man. It's been a tough run with that, too, a little bit. And I applied to a U.S. veterans program that specialized in equine stuff. It was called Heroes and Horses in 2021. And 2021, I went down, I attended that. And it was 41 days long in Montana. And it was hard routine. It's not one of these vet programs where they're going to hold your hand and talk about your experience and it's okay. Like sleep in if you want, if you're having a bad day. Like it's none of that bullshit. And I don't treat my vets like that because that's not how you get better. You don't get better by being coddled and enabled by, these vet programs, these non-profits that help vets. Where we're helping veterans, how? You got them box tickets to a Knicks game and you got a friggin' selfie with Kobe and you put them up in the Hilton. How's that help anybody? It's bullshit. It's self-ingratiate. Don't get me wrong. These are good goes for vets. I get that. You want to help him? Send him and his kid. So he has some father-son things that he couldn't afford, or him and his wife to a retreat someplace so that they can connect again and they can work through these problems. I mean, these good go trips for vets are bullshit. But I did Heroes and Horses, man. And, that opened my eyes to, I think, and it was hard. It's hard routine. There's PT every day. They put you on a strict diet. I lost 38 pounds in 41 days. You do ice cold plunges. You got to look inside yourself and find the spark again. And they make you, they literally, they don't make you do it. They set the conditions for you to do it if you want, if you actually want to get better. Because there's this awful, awful culture, especially in Canada, of this victim, veteran, professional victim thing, where they wear their disgruntled veteran T-shirt and they tell everyone to fuck off at Walmart, and they're just like, well, you don't know what I've been through. It's like, yeah, I do know what you've been through, bro. I know, promise. And I could be just like you. It'd be really easy for me to smoke. I'm sorry, I'm ranting at you now, but
go for it.
They also overprescribe medical marijuana to veterans. What the fuck? Like, dude, like, you know, I'm entitled to 5 grams of weed a day. That's insane. I can't smoke 5 grams. I couldn't smoke 5 grams of weed a day. But they give it to these guys like medicine, and it makes me feel better. And they're like, I've got buddies that are high before the coffee pot's brewed in the morning, under the guise that someone told them this is a healthier option than pharma, which I'm not saying it's not. That's bad too. But if you're not exercising and getting good sleep and eating good food and getting outside in nature and maintaining a proper accountable position in your community, both your veteran community and the community that you live in, why don't you do those 5 things first and then tell me you're still fucked up? Do them and not just try them. Oh, I can't. Like, do it for a year. Do it for a fucking year. And then look at medication. Then look at other things. Go to your doctor. Tell them the truth. I'm just angry a lot. I'm not angry. I'm fed up with the way that vets are coddled and the way that vets use that coddling to enable them to continue to not grow. Dude, like, yeah. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant there. Sorry, guys, but
no,
yeah.
But you are right about the things of you have to face those demons, right?
Yes,
and if you don't face it, they get bigger and stronger. And it's the unfortunate thing with people doing like too much in weed or any of the other ones like that. Like same with the old days where people were injured and they gave them here's oxys, that'll take your pain away. And then the problem that came with dudes after that kind of thing. And I think it's important, like, you know, hey, some people, you know, the weed, if you still want to drink or whatever people's things are, but it has to be within a moderation. And the most important thing is keeping a fitness kind of thing going. Like they're showing so much of just even walking. Like people are like, I don't have money for a gym. I don't have this or that. Everyone can just walk around the block, right? Or find a park. And it is amazing. Like when I've got for a school project or if I've got a midterm or a test coming up, I'll walk around campus, just get that stuff going. And I find it's like, oh, wait, hey, there we go. Yeah, right. It's amazing the little endorphins and stuff that we can get. But also if you do look after your health that way, when you notice those physical things and you go, hey, the gut's going away. Hey, this is going. Hey, I've noticed I can go up the stairs better. You get that extra kind of benefit of, hey, you notice it and now you got all those endorphins too. And now you kind of want to keep going on that pathway of, I'm going to keep looking after myself. And I think it's important to try and keep fitness a part of something, even if it is just walking around, because we get too much into that. Oh, this weed, it was doctor prescribed, or, oh, this, it's all doctor. And yeah, sometimes, but we've also seen that sometimes that whole cycle of, you know, sometimes that doctor just wants to buy a new boat and you're just that thing for it. So, yeah. And it's that whole, you know, is it an honorable, righteous doctor, or do they just see you as somebody that's going to keep being a down payment for whatever they have? And I think that you kind of get that too with certain psychology and stuff like that, where if they don't totally understand where the vet's coming from, then they're not, you know, able to truly kind of understand what they're going through in that moment. And yeah, it's sometimes that kick in the ass where it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do now? Get going. Come on. That happened to you how long ago? Oh, that was 10 years ago? Okay, well, hey, you got to keep moving. So I like what you're saying about that stuff, of that you do need to get that kick in the ass every now and then to hold yourself accountable.
Yes, because as men, and I've been doing a lot of homework on as a 39-year-old man, what is my, like, I don't have children, I don't have a wife, but what is my space in culture? What's our purpose? Because like, my purpose wasn't to be a soldier. You know, I don't know what my purpose is writ large, man, but I'll tell you what, it's to be a man and do the things that men are supposed to do, which is supposed to protect and provide to their community or their household or their friends or their paternal family. Like, your job is to, regardless of what it is, like the VAC programs of like the income replacement benefit. And I get there's guys that are actually too fucked up for it. I get that. But you can do something. You can do something. And everybody knows, every one of these messed up guys, when they go to bed at night, if they were to sit on the edge of their bed and ask themselves, okay, here's 5 things that I could do to make my life a little bit better tomorrow when I wake up. Now, if they were to do those things and go to bed and then do those things again and do that for a year, that spark that was inside them that made them walk into a recruiting center to give themselves to something greater than it was them and to put their mind and their body and their heart in the direction of building, being an asset to their team, they can still do that again in some capacity. That is not selfish. And a lot of guys aren't doing it. They are incentivized, and I was incentivized to just literally sit on my ass and do nothing for the rest of my life. And I can't go, much like my dad, who still works these days in his 70s. Like, a shark needs to move to breathe. I'm one of those people too. And it's not all, and another one is just like, it's not just about recreation. It's not just about me going and fly fishing and doing fun things all the time. It's putting your heart and soul into things that are bigger than you and learning. And if you stop doing that and you make your life about watching Netflix and smoking weed, that's worse than death. That's worse than actually dying in the war. Like, it's wild to me. I've got buddies who died and they're still sitting in front of Netflix right now. They're former shells of themselves. And I'm not saying this like I'm this altruistic, like I have the answers. Like, there's some guys out there that preach a lot, right? And they do it. They have a lot of discipline. I was a shitbag, and I have my bad days too. I have them. I do I have them frequently enough. Like, I'm not out of the woods on any of this stuff at all. But I try. I really work hard at it. The way I look at my pension that I received from the Canadian government is my new full-time job is to take care of myself. And that's not just live a fun life until I die. It's to take care of myself mentally and emotionally and spiritually, and to find some new purpose and then set my might to that and do my best within the capacity that I can, and to fail in the direction of progress and the success instead of succeeding in the direction of failure, which is sitting on your ass and taking your government money and doing your thing. And there's guys who do that. And I'll welcome, like, if any of them want to talk about it after this podcast comes out, I'm more than like, hey bro, there's more you could be doing. There literally is. Yeah, but I don't have to. But I don't have to either, dude. But my life is richer because I choose to push it in the direction of growth.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing as well, right? Like, you know, broke the back, all the stuff like that. But on Instagram and some of these social media things that I follow people that, like, they've lost their legs and an arm and they're getting ready to climb a mountain. And I'm like, okay, they're missing limbs and they're not letting them hold that back. I'm not going to let, the injuries I have do that. And I mean, my passion I've found is just to serve those that served and get their story out there. And if somebody else can hear your words and go, you know what, I am just sitting on the couch smoking dope and watching Netflix all the time, I'm going to now do something, right? And that's what I think the beauty about these kinds of shows is that when a person needs to hear the words, they'll find something that will spark them. And sometimes it's not that, you'll find eventually. Sometimes it's somebody being like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, smarten up.
Yeah.
Where's your why? That used to be your why. Go, do it, progress. And I think there is a bit of a change, I think, coming within it, right? Where people were accepting more of the, I am a victim, aren't I? Yeah, I should do this. And I think they're slowly kind of getting a thing where people are being inspired by countless different individuals online where they go, you know what? I've spent these last couple of years and I didn't really do much with it. So I'm going to start changing. So yeah, I think words that you say are very important, and the right person will find it when they need to. So
my initial like why for doing these podcasts, because these are like inherently uncomfortable for me, was the fact that I know that there's like a private in one RCR right now who didn't deploy, and maybe he's going through a divorce, or maybe he's having a hard time, whatever is going on in his life. He doesn't feel he can ask for help because he didn't do a bunch of certain things that he thinks guys are entitled to. And I felt as like a tattooed, bearded warfighter, like SF guy, if I can take a knee and say that my time in service affected my mental health to the point where I needed to ask for help, that gives permission to a lot of other people that don't believe that they could. That was a few years ago. And now the way that I look at it is, and I'm not, having said that, man, I'll be my first to stick my hand up and say, like, I'm not much of a role model for people to look to. Like, I've got some things that I've pushed myself in the direction of to progress. But I still, like I said, man, I still get my bad days, and they're ugly. They're fucking ugly. And so it's submitting to the fact that perfection is not a thing, okay? Like, you're going to have bad days, but having one bad day every week or 10 days is better than having a bad day every other day. That's progress. And if that's the best you can do, and you don't give up on yourself to do it, that's awesome, dude. That's fucking beautiful. And that's something that I don't think I'm an inspiring guy, but if I could inspire someone to do that, I would want them to. Part of my impetus for working as hard as I do, and here's one of the hardest things I ever did. Like, this is actually harder than I did than selection, was to take a guy that doesn't know anything about how to do cowboy stuff or mountain man things and throw myself into a very, very culturally diverse, very, very specific world and be a new guy again and want it bad enough that I'm willing to be bad in front of people that look up to me to do it. As an operator, I wasn't bad at very many things. So for me to be going to a new world and be bad at something, it was hard. I'm like, God, like I spent some time on an outfit this year, man, where I don't think I did anything right for more than 30 seconds in a row before I made a mistake for about a month and a half. And that was so hard on my ego. Like, I hid behind the brim that I bought and the cowboy lifestyle and the hard nose, like, yeah, I ride horses and, you know, this. But inside, I was like, much like it was when I was an operator, do I deserve to be here? What do I need to do to prove to my friends and family and myself that I deserve to be here and do this thing? And throwing myself at something, whether it's guiding or horsemanship or training or the anti-poaching thing, throwing myself into things that are completely unknown is terrifying to me. Like, I get scared, dude. That's scary shit. And I honestly believe that growth occurs in that discomfort or in that exposure to fear. Like, if you're a guy, like, I look at guys like, you know what I hate? I hate going into Walmart. I don't like being around crowded people. Like, I'm a vet. I'm also a normal person. I never like that. It has nothing to do with my time in service. And if you're a vet that can't go into Walmart because it's a packed grocery store, yeah, you know what you should do? Go into Walmart, and it's going to suck, and do it for 5 minutes, then do it for 8 minutes, then do it for 10 minutes. And expose yourself to things that suck, because much like I pick up a weight in the gym and I tear muscles and I increase the level of discomfort with every plate that I throw onto something, I grow. And that exists in the mental health and the exposure therapy world too. If you've got problems, or if you want to learn something, do you think you're going to go to like law school and nail all your tests? Do you think you're not going to work hard for the rest of your life? Like, that's not what life's about, man. Like, it's about driving in the direction of the things that are the hardest things you can think of. And for some people, that's just being alive. For others, it's being a dad or a good husband and these kinds of things. And yeah, I invite people to do things that scare them a little bit, to sweat, to put themselves in positions of discomfort, whether that's an ice cold shower. If that's the hardest thing you did today, that's still better than the thing you did yesterday, which was nothing. And then build on that and be proud of yourself for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think some people just got a little bit too comfortable in the plateau. And I mean, some of the greatest things you can feel is absolutely sucking at something and just hating it, hating yourself and wanting to quit. But in that moment when you actually get it and you go, holy shit, whoa, God, look at this, look at this. That is the biggest sense of pride. And, you know, and then you forget about how hard it was. And then you're like, yeah, man, I can't believe this was thing. And then you find that new thing. And then when you keep pushing yourself, I mean, you never have to be great at stuff, but just to never quit at trying something. Like, you know, you could try in whatever activity, and whether it's just your body type or whatnot, you may never be able to be the best at it, but you could be as best as you can try to be and always keep trying to improve those little things. So yeah, I just want to get a little more into, so you're getting out. Did you do the anti-poaching or did you go cowboy? Which, just to see which way we were going on that.
Yeah, no, one of my things I did is I swore off guns for a year in my first year of retirement. And I broke that rule when I was an intern guide in Alaska on my first year. So I got out and did that program here in Montana. And then my phase 3 internship for that program is, in that program, you can kind of pick if you want to go to Texas and do an internship as a cowboy for a few months, or if you want to go guide. And there was a lot more of the laterally transferable skills that I enjoyed from being like a bushman and growing up in the sticks in Ontario. And that I was like, yeah, I think guiding's for me, you know. And I went out to a couple outfits. I worked in Alaska for a minute. And then my second season, I came back. I wanted to increase my skills in that particular domain because we don't have elk in Ontario. There are elk in Ontario, but like not like here in Montana or in Alberta or in the West. I didn't really know much about them. So I went to a guide school and I got a job at an outfit here where I would pack mules in the mountains with groceries and hunting and camping kit, and then set up a camp, and you come out and you meet clients at the airport. So there's a lot of customer relations. I like the idea, much like when I was a soldier. I liked being that guy when the chips are down. I always wanted one of my buddies to look over and be like, I'm glad Coke's here. And so I get to be that guy again. Elements of that I get to be an asset in a potential crisis moment, and certainly one that is inherently dangerous to people that want to come and experience the mountains and do that stuff. And so I did that for a couple of years. I found an outfit in DuBois, Wyoming, that I learned the ins and outs of that business and how to assist and guide bighorn sheep, which is an incredibly challenging animal to pursue ethically from a harvest standpoint. They live above the tree line. Like, they live way deep in the bush. They have like 8-pound binocular vision. Like, it takes days. Like, the last sheep hunt that I got to assist and guide on, we had to glass for 9 days before we saw one in the mountains, like living in a little tent in the snow and all this stuff. And so it's an inherently challenging environment. I felt that I kind of had a little bit of a grip on that. But what I didn't feel like I was very good at was my horsemanship. I get so much out of the relationship that I get with a horse, whether I'm in the backcountry dragging a string of mules in, or leading a string of mules in, I should say, to a camp. But I was not a very good horse rider, and I wanted to get better at that. So I dedicated this year to elements of the cowboy skill set, which I don't know. I think the two most manly things you can do, and I do struggle with, like, am I a man? Like, I actually ask myself that, no joke. Like, I'm a cowboy in Montana, and I fought wars as a special forces guy, and I still go to bed at night like, am I a man? Am I doing man things? But I did the cowboy thing. I went back up and stayed with my good friend Dallas in Alberta after a particularly gnarly breakup with a woman that I was just head over heels for. I lived in Bozeman, Montana. I love the lifestyle. She was beautiful, very successful in her domain, and a really great rodeo athlete. And just, anyway, it was not, the relationship just dissolved. It wasn't great. It had its moments of pure bliss, but it really hurt me. And I was like, now what am I going to do? I go up to Alberta, where I'm living in a little cabin. And we had about 11 days of sustained minus 40. And like, it was rough, man. Like, the trucks wouldn't start, couldn't go to town. We're eating canned food. You know, it was pretty rough. And I got a call from this anti-poaching outfit that I had kind of expressed a bit of interest in it through a third party who was maybe going to go do that. And they needed a guy, and they called a few. They referenced me. I never applied for this job. Like, they referenced me through some people who knew me through the Special Operations Forces like network in Australia, and I got asked if I would go to South Sudan.
Crazy. So, and you had never gone to Africa beforehand, so now you're just like, I'm going to go check out the South Sudan. What was that like?
So I did something really stupid before I went. Actually, I did a number of really stupid things before I went. The first stupid thing that I did was I didn't prepare myself physically. Like, I had been out for 4 years. I'm like, whatever, man, I'm a guide. I climb mountains. I can do this. It is not the same. Like, climbing mountains and guiding sheep it's hunting. So you're moving as fast as you can observe your space to pursue a quarry, right? Which is, hey, that's like patrolling, right? But there's elements of my personal physical fitness that I did not sort out before I went there. And I paid for the first while I was there, man. Because I went from -40 in Alberta to like +45 plus humidity in like the sub-Saharan savannah. And again, it was something else.
Oh, yeah, that would be your body just going, what the fuck did you just do to me? Like,
Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh,
Yeah, it was pretty gnarly. Like, I turned 34. I'm standing in the shower. Sorry, 39. I'm standing in the shower on my 39th birthday. This is before I knew Sudan was coming up. And I'm like, I have a year to do anything I want to before I can roll into 40 looking like whatever I want. I could lose a bunch of weight. I could go to school. I could do a bunch of savings. I could buy a home. Like, I have 1 year to roll into 40, making it look like whatever I want. And I didn't choose at that time. I'm just like, I'm going to just work really hard at a couple of things that I really enjoy and see what happens, which is not direct. That's not a smart goal. But when I got to Africa, I started losing a bunch of weight. I had a heart attack the other week too. Actually, I had a heart attack. What day is it? 4 days ago. I had a heart attack 4 days ago.
Jesus.
And yeah. So I'm 39 years old. I got malaria, Rocky Mountain spotted fever in Oklahoma, and a heart attack in the same year. And I'm like, okay, like maybe God's trying to tell me something. But Africa was something else, man. So I got to go over there with the not so fit body of a younger soldier that I enjoyed when I was an operator. But I went over there with 39 years of wisdom and a solid know-how grasp of the human condition, what it's like to be around these poor people, an idea of what motivates them. And I get the privilege to train and lead these men operationally to protect their country, a national park, and the wild animals that exist in it, that enjoys the single largest mammal migration on the planet is in South Sudan. And it's not it's 4 times larger than the Serengeti migration. I remember being in a bush plane and flying over herds of animals for tens of minutes, and you couldn't see the grass. It was thick with animals. There's millions and millions of animals during that season.
That's crazy.
And it's absolutely wild. And it's not to war and fight and kill people. It's enforcing the law. And we didn't have to shoot anybody. You know, the objective was not to get in a gunfight. And I got to work with some awesome guys that are equally as passionate about it from the tier 1 community across the globe, the tier 1 and 2 community across the globe. I work with an Aussie guy who, him and I are still friends. We suffer from similar proclivities. And yeah, he's just like, I just made a bunch of buddies and I got to experience something really, really wild. And it's, with any luck, I get to go back in February to Zambia and work for that same company. This is an Australian company based out of Cape Town, South Africa, which was another dope spot. Like, I spent just a day in Cape Town and then landed in Ethiopia for a night in Addis Ababa. And that was like, that's a wild, people think like Ethiopia, it's actually incredibly metropolitan, like especially the capital. It's gorgeous. And I felt very safe. And I mean, my feeling of safe is very relative. I get that. Like, there are women, young women in this country that don't feel safe walking from their residence to the library on their college campus. And I can walk down. So I get that. But yeah. And then I land in South Sudan. on a bush plane at this park, and I step off wearing Wrangler jeans that I've starched so they look good. They're ironed, and actually this shirt and a cowboy wild rag and my cowboy hat. And I step off, and I remember like the looks I was getting, dressed like a Western mountain cowboy in like the airport in Ethiopia. It was kind of wild, but yeah, it's part of who I am, and it's part of what I do, and yeah, the anti-poaching thing was great. I got a few really great experiences to live through some things that bothered me about my time in service with the wisdom to live them right this time, if that makes any sense. One of the examples I think of is, had a friend named Drew from the regiment killed the day before my birthday in 2015. And I remember helping one of the guys unpack Drew's equipment when his warfighting gear was repatriated back to Petawawa. And I remember opening up a Ziploc bag that had his Garmin Fortrex that had blood on it and a bullet hole in it. And I was peeling back the bag that was sticky from his blood. And that messed me up for years. I had one of my Rangers injured, not severely, but I was first on scene. I would normally roll with a group of about 25 guys, 25 local park rangers that we trained up, and they were very good. I think they're very good soldiers. Not soldiers. They enforce the law of the Rangers. And the GPS that was on his equipment was damaged in this fall. My job on that ground force for that operation was as the 2IC. So I'm making sure after this critical incident that all his weapons and all the injured parties' weapons and gear is sorted out. And I remember we're putting it in buckets back at the hangar, and I'm accounting for all of it and writing it down in my notebook to make sure I could tell the boss and the client that, like, yes, we have all the critical equipment that is back, and our guys are on the way to the hospital. They don't have any bombs or firearms or anything on their person. Not bombs. You didn't have bombs. They just had firearms and no ammo. I remember holding Benson was his Ranger's name. His GPS that had a big crack in it. I was brought back to that moment where I held Drew's busted GPS. And I was like, I was able to link these two experiences, detach from the emotion through years of therapy and talking to doctors and my own self work, that I could be like, I did everything I could today, and this was out of my control, and he's going to be fine, and I've accounted for all this stuff. And this is very similar to the experience I had with Drew's gear, but I'm in a much better place in my life to live this moment and put both of them to bed. And instances like that, I had a handful of them. And it was actually a very healing trip for me. It was hard. I lost a bunch of weight. I got sick. Like, I worked harder than I wanted to. It was tough, but it was a very healing trip for me to go and do that.
That's awesome. And I mean, again, I think it's like you said earlier, where if you keep running from everything, you'll never be able to solve it. But you were able to take a moment that was happening currently, link it to another one, and bring some closure to that and help with the healing.
Yep.
And I think some people are just too scared to bring up those old emotions and try and get through them and stuff like that. And then that's where substance abuse and other things, because you can't get through it, just forget about it with a bottle. Yeah, that's an amazing thing how you were able to transition those into a new stage, a new kind of thought process.
Yeah. It's kind of like the psychology behind it is very similar to EMDR, where you are reliving a moment through a memory while you're bilaterally stimulating your parts of your brain, and then you're detaching the narrative that you had previously associated to it and putting a much more logical, non-emotionally attached narrative to it. And so I didn't even realize that I did this with the GPS thing. It was only during a couple medical appointments that I was able to do that. They were like, "Oh, do you know what you just did?" And I was like, "I have no idea." But they were able to coach me through, like, kind of explain to me why it was that incident was good, and how the tools in the toolbox that I've accumulated over 12 years in therapy, I was able to put to use at a critical moment, so that I can put those things, like I said, put those to bed and be okay with it. I don't have any, I saw far more poverty and heartbreaking stuff in Africa than I ever saw in Afghanistan. But it didn't affect me. And it's not because I'm a callous guy. I think I'm an incredibly compassionate, empathetic dude. But I was able to look at it through a lens of like, I'm here providing a service and I'm going to be kind and exercise that compassion and empathy with these people. And they might, they might kill me, but that won't kill me. What might kill me is me not being that guy, being a callous dude and not doing what I could to help these people or myself. Because I didn't go over there to help the people I went over there, they paid me a bit of money and it was good. I went over there for selfish reasons. I wanted to go and do something again to prove to me that I still had it, to be on a team again, for a bit of adventure. I wanted to honor the team that I was working for. I wanted to help with these animals and their very precarious situation that they have with these national parks over there and their initial 18 months of infrastructure setup. And I wanted to do that. I didn't go over there to save the white rhino.
Yeah. Now, were you saying there, there's more poverty than in Afghanistan? How did you see that? Where did you, I'm trying to figure out the word. How did you, comparing between the two, in the differences between the countries?
I think one of the things that helped with those two situations was when you're there in the Army, especially from an SF standpoint, because we got, honestly, hand on heart, man, we got spoiled, man. We got great food. Sometimes we didn't. But for the most part, we were really taken care of. We had access to doctors. We didn't live with the local people. These kinds of things. We're on a camp surrounded by other people. There's the boardwalk at Kandahar Airfield, this kind of shit. When I went there, I was living with these people. When you go to town to get stuff that you need, like foot powder, which you can't get there because it doesn't exist, you're there with them. You're not suffering on the same degree they are because you're going to go home and leave. But you have a little bit closer look into the things that they are. And they actually become your friends because you need to rely on them outside of just I had far more intimate patrols with these Rangers than I ever had with some of the partner force we had in Afghanistan. Because we were in control. At any point, these guys could have turned around and killed me. If they didn't trust me, didn't like me, if I said the wrong thing about their family, whatever, right? They could have done that. And so I'm at their mercy. So I had to become one of them. And so once I became one of them, not one of them, I'm never going to be one of them. I'm a white guy. I'm a co-agent, which is their word for white dude. I got to see their life through a different lens. I got to see life there through a different lens. And when you rock up into a park and people are, say they're poaching trees to make charcoal and selling it in town because no one has a stove because everyone's broke. They cook everything over fire. You see them in a different light. I had more compassion for them because I was living and breathing and eating with these guys. And I think that was the big difference. Now, maybe I would have been different if I had, if I went on an anti-poaching mission in Afghanistan, I don't know what would be poaching, but maybe I would have a similar kind of an experience. But probably not. Culture, they're just vastly different. And I just connected with them on a much deeper level than any of the partner corps that I've ever got to roll with.
Well, that's cool.
Yep.
So you go do the anti-poaching stuff, and then did you start knowing that the cowboy lifestyle was kind of really starting to pull you in, and that's kind of where you were just going to start leaning into now? Yeah,
there's elements of that traditions that exist there. I don't want to get too much into politics stuff, but I believe that people should be able to do what they want. But yes, libertarian style stuff. But there's elements of the conservative old school style cowboy culture that I really enjoy. There's elements of that culture that I don't want to do. But there's parts of it. I wear my hat, and I was thinking about wearing it for this interview, or this podcast, but I elected not to. But I wear my hat in town, and that's a thing you just do here. And just because you have a hat on doesn't mean you're a cowboy. But what it did talk to me is a subscription to the Code of the West. I've got a good buddy, Chris Hunt, on Instagram. He runs this website called the Code of the West. And Chris is not a cowboy. Yeah, he's been on a horse and stuff like that. But what's more important is that Code of the West is a subscription to things like live with courage, keep your word. That like these kinds of hallmarks of that, those are the 11 tenets of the Cowboy Code of the West. That if you live to these things, you will inherently be a better person. And these traditions in modern agriculture today, in the way society is trying to shame and take away farmers' lands, or turn everything public, or turn everything private, and there's a way of lifestyle that we're going to lose if younger guys like me, and I say young, like I'm 39, but there are old timers that have never worn anything other than the Wrangler jeans in their life, and their way of life, their lifestyle, that way of life that they've been honoring the whole time is dying. And I had this old timer tell me that, you know, I really want you to like wear your hat, tie your wild rag on properly, because if young men in your generation don't do this, it will die with us. And I believe in that. And there are elements of the cowboy life that I lived this year that I don't really like that much. There's a term called saddle tramp, and I have a saddle and I put it in my truck and I drive down the road to outfits where I don't know anybody and I just day work for them for a flat rate. And you get on a horse you don't know, and you go out there and you take care of cows. You go there and you fix fence, or you go find stray cows in the mountains and come down and you work with them for a week, and then maybe you'll get in your truck and you'll drive to another state and do it there. And there's guys that have been doing this their whole life. And I'm like, what's more cowboy than being a saddle tramp? Because I can't afford a ranch. Might as well try that. And there's some real gems of human beings in that. There are some subcultures in the cowboy world that are just fascinating to me. I'm looking at it through a lens of a new guy. I didn't grow up doing this like a lot of these guys did, but I do have access because of the privilege of my veteran status where I can get in, and these men entertain me being their mentee, which I'm very, very grateful for. It's opened a heck ton of doors, and yeah, there's some really great people in it. Now there is rampant alcoholism in some aspects of the cowboy world. Like there's a saying too, and if we drink ourselves to death, ain't that the cowboy way to go, is a Tom Russell lyric. And, you know, I mean, like just there's ugly parts of it, right? But there's some beautiful parts to it too, man. There's some real beautiful parts to it. It was actually a couple weeks ago. I'm riding on the range up on we're above 7,000, we're above 7,000 feet. There's no snow yet. And I'm up there on the saddle, and I can see another veteran buddy of mine who runs this ranch down low. And I can see another veteran buddy up top, and we're trying to find these cows. And horseback riding is inherently dangerous. The terrain is treacherous. So there's elements of resiliency and danger associated with it as well. And it's really, really cool. And at the end of the day, you're like, man, we did that, you know, and it's actually far more dangerous than people think. Like, it's wild. People die. Guys die every year, man. Rodeos killed people. Like, guys die cowboying every year. It's gnarly. It's like Alaskan crab fishermen falling off the boat and dying. Like, yeah, everybody knows that's dangerous, but nobody ever thinks that like cowboy stuff's dangerous. It's just risk that you assume, and you know when you show up there in the morning, like you might not, and it's not like fighting a war, but there is an inherent risk to it. It's not like going to work at HR or showing up at Xerox to fix copiers. Like there's risk there, and it's hard. And there's the elements. You're outside. It's like logging. Logging's another one, man. I've never been a logger, but yeah.
Yeah, no, what is it? Riding, like being around a horse and riding a horse and kind of that bonding with the creature. Is it just being out in nature and doing something that's very old school, right? Like I'm not going to say primitive, but it is one of those people have been doing it for a very long time, and you tap into, it's like when you go fishing and all of a sudden it's nothing, but as soon as you catch it, you start reeling. It's that whole different sensation.
Yeah.
What is it?
Good point, man. I've got a really good buddy of mine, man. He was a long tab special forces guy from the States who I actually met in 2012 on a base, but we didn't really remember it. And he runs a nonprofit that we started cowboying a bit together this year in the saddle. And he did a quote the other day. He posted something on Instagram, and he said, every time I swing a leg over a horse, I feel I've been transported back 200 years, because I can't think of too many ways of life that are pretty much the same today in 2024 as they were in 1861, Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, where you're pushing cows on four legs from Dallas to Montana. And there's the risk of natives, there's a risk of disease, there's a risk of you starving to death, there's a risk of all these things. Now, obviously, you don't have that, but there is inherent risk in that. And another thing that really hit me hard in 2021, I got to backpack across a bunch, or not backpack, horsepack across a bunch of U.S. wilderness areas. And they do the management of state land very, very differently here than they do in Canada, where you have like national parks, provincial parks. They have much more, there's a lot more levels of public land here in America. And one of them is a wilderness area. And the only way that you are legally allowed to access a wilderness area is on horseback or on foot. You can't bring in a motor. You can't bring in a chainsaw to cut down trees that fall across the trail. You're not allowed. You have to bring hand tools. You have to use the old school ways in these areas. And because there are so many barriers, like those barriers, people choose to not go there very often. So they're not as well traveled as, like, say, Yellowstone National Park, where you can drive through in your car and see bison and go to the geysers and stuff like that, which is beautiful. And I recommend everybody do it. It's amazing. And I think everyone should see it before they die. It's just heaven. It is heaven. But these wilderness areas, and we got up into one of these wilderness areas, and I was there with a SEAL named Micah Fink, who runs Heroes and Horses. And we're looking at this mountain one night. We're on a 14-day long trip where we moved every day. You had to pack up all your animals, and you're in the saddle for 8 hours every day. And that's actually pretty hard on the body, man. Like, it hurts your pelvis, your knees are jacked up. You're not walking, but you get to travel country. And when the horse is walking, he's looking where you're going, and you should be looking at the mountains, the trees, and the landscape. And we're packed up, or unpacked camp one night, and you hobble the horses, and they're just grazing nearby, and the camp cook's got his stuff going, and you're having a cup of coffee with your buddies. And he said, look at those. I'm going to get kind of choked thinking about this, dude, because it's actually really fucking moving. And enjoy that, because there are brothers and sisters who died downrange protecting your right to be here and see these things that we'll never get to see it. And I think about that a lot. I think about the places that I've got to see. I've had the privilege, the blessing to see that so few people have seen. I was up in Wyoming last season on a sheep hunt in the middle of nowhere, chasing these sheep over these mountains. It's a 24-mile ride, a 38-kilometer ride into this camp just to start the hunt. And then you start from there. This is way deeper than most people going in the woods to hunt. And I'm up on top of one of these ridge lines, or just below the ridge line, kind of in the above the trees below. Can. I left it where it was because I believe in that. And this can was closed with a solder dot. And they stopped using solder dots to close cans in 1904. Someone climbed that mountain over 100 years ago, and maybe he was the last guy to be there until I was there. And I got to see that. Like, I got to tread and walk the same trails of the mountain men and the Native Americans that built this country. And I think I get a small piece of that. And I take such great pride in it. Like, I didn't build it, but I have the grit to go to the places that men that did do, where so many few people have the courage to do that, or the means or the access. And that's what has drawn me to do that.
Yeah, there is something about the recharge and just a humbling of nature where you almost just get to find your place in it, right? And you just, everything that seems crazy and whatnot, you're just like, I am a person surrounded by these trees and mountains, and it kind of humbles you into, like, your problems, they're not as bad as you think, unless you're running from the law because you for murder or something. Then it's it ain't going away with nature. But I think a lot of people would have a lot of benefit just decompressing in nature, not taking your phone with you, and just looking at a mountain, looking at a stream, and just realizing there's beauty in so much stuff, and you can just get a nice little recharge if you take away the chaos of the world that's around you.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Like there's just recently in the last couple of years, certain levels of physicians in Canada have been allowed to prescribe national and provincial park passes to veterans so that they can go and recharge in this nature. The Japanese have been building green spaces in places like Tokyo because they understand the regenerative effects of human beings spending time in nature. The Native Americans, which I subscribe extremely heavily to their way of life. I mean, like, look at me. And so, like, one of my absolute dearest friends is a lady named Sarah, who is the adopted sister of a medicine man from Standing Rock, the Lakota Nation in South Dakota. And she has taught me so much. She, like, this human being herself, she has got, and this isn't like hippie shit. This is like, she has got an old world Native American remedy to just about every ailment that, and she's an ER nurse. She's just like one of the most remarkable women I've ever met. And she tells me these stories about their old ways and how healthy these people used to be and how they actually built the West and how the effects that we're doing to ourselves by staring at screens, by sleeping in beds, by living in buildings, by ostracizing ourselves. Like, we are not meant to be non-communal animals. We're not. You put 10 naked people in a dark room and lock the door, after 5 days, they'll all stand naked in the same corner together, even if they can't speak each other's language. We are tribal entities as human beings. We do not exist or thrive on our own. Now, I live on my own, and I don't like that. And by that, I mean, I am a part of numerous communities, but I believe in things like monogamy. I believe in things like community. I believe in the concept of tribe. And these people cornered that. They knew what to do and how to survive here long before we ever built a building on this continent. And in my opinion, we've robbed them of that way of life, but that's a different podcast altogether. But you're right, dude. When I look at medicine that you can get from plants, and instead of taking a pill, spend time outside and don't drink substance and consume water and eat lean meat and vegetables that grow out of the ground and be around your friends, enjoying those spaces, and you will become a healthier person. You actually will. You can't not. It's how we're supposed to live. It's the radio frequencies from, I don't want to sound like Alex Jones and shit, but like the weird radio frequencies we get blasted our bodies with every day just by holding the phone to our head. Like, man, it's nuts, dude. Like, and I'm not some hippy dippy guy, man, but we're doing it wrong. Like, we are doing it wrong here in the civilized West. Having said that, I love Starbucks too. It's good, but we could be doing better.
Well, exactly. I mean, one of my favorite things is during the summertime and stuff like that is growing herb gardens, right? Like fresh thyme, oregano, all those things. Like, and there's something satisfying about doing that. And I mean, my family got me one of those like indoor grow ones where like the pods you put in and then here's your basil, here's your this. I love that. And there's something it's simple. I don't have to do anything. The light turns on all on its own. I just got to make sure the water. But when you pull those herbs off and you're like, oh, wow, this sauce I made, just it connects you more to what you're cooking too, because you're like, these were the herbs I grew. So this spaghetti sauce, it's my little tomatoes and it's my, rosemary and this and that. And simple things like that are amazing for just these little boosters to your brain and everything that you're just like, yeah, I accomplished a little something. I mean, I love doing that.
Yes. Like the medicine's not just, and by medicine, it's an old world term that doesn't translate directly from elements of the native culture that we use it as. We're like, we think medicine, we're thinking like pharma and ibuprofen, all this shit, right? But like medicine can be a lot of stuff. Going out and harvesting an elk that you are going to get up in the morning and drive out there. And like, having said that, hunting is a rich guy pastime. I get that. I'm not saying this is subsistence hunting stuff. But you harvest an animal and you take it home and it's prepared with you and your family and you put it on the table. That is medicine. That process to your heart, that process with your family, that process is medicine in the tradition, in the Native American traditional sense. And the things that are contained in the things you put in your body should be your first line medicine. Like, I fire doctors, like, because I had a lot of doctors over the years. If in the first session they're not asking me how much I'm sleeping, how much activity I'm getting, and what I'm eating, and how much water I drink, like, next. Like, I've been in 8-minute long doctor's appointments where they tried to push two more pills on me. I'm like, get the fuck out of here, bro. Like, no. Like, put turmeric in your food. Don't take ibuprofen. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's there are ways to heal your body, because food is medicine. Food's medicine. And it ought to be people's. I think it should be the front line. It's my front line. Like, I mean, I had a jammer a few days ago, but all my blood levels come back, and like, your cholesterol's good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, it's yeah, like, keep doing what you're doing. You should probably drink less. Like, yeah, I know that already. Fuck off. But yeah, there's also not a lot. Oh. Sorry, I just had a call.
Oh, no, not a problem.
I got a call from this guy. His name is Wayne, man. He goes by Bullet. He's a trip. His name is, he's a paraplegic Marine Corps vet who is he just got out of the hospital with cancer. He calls me every couple of days, and he's a cow boss. He's got a machine that gets him on a horse as a paraplegic, and he goes out and he manages a team of cowboys at a ranch to take care of cows in Louisiana. Incredible human being.
So he's paraplegic. He gets something to help him on the horse,
Yep.
and then he's just on a horse. Wow, that's
Yeah. Actually, he got wheeled into a rodeo. He was telling me the story the other day. He got wheeled into a rodeo a few weeks ago, and just, I don't know what came of it. There might have been something about a girl. I don't know, but he applied to ride slack, which is like when you, after the main event of the rodeo is done, you can compete for money if you weren't on the list of original applicants, or like when you sign up. I don't know much about rodeo. But he goes and he wins $1,000 roping. He's a really talented, like, steer roper on horseback. As a paraplegic black Marine Corps veteran, just wild guy, man. He's a trip, total trip. I started this intentional, organized community. If I can dip into like a plug, can I do my plug?
Keep plugging, plug.
So I started this intentional, organized community of guys like me who went and fought in wars, or they did time in service. Maybe they didn't go to war, doesn't matter. But they find solace and community and purpose in the West, in the cowboy or mounted realm. And it's called the Warfighter Cowboy Union. And it became a monster almost overnight. And by monster, I mean, it's not big, but it's rich. It's a rich community of people. And this network of guys has opened so many doors for me, and I've been able to facilitate. And the community facilitated doors opening for other people to grow and branch or get better jobs or get better, like, whatever, right? Like, I think it's been an improvement to the greater veteran cowboy community writ large. And I've had so many opportunities, I can't even keep up with them all. And I've got guys like Bullet that just called me that are they're ardent supporters of it. Like, we've got a rodeo team that's going to compete next year at like one of the richest roping events in America. Like wild. We get invited out to go do drives because there's something about a veteran who can show up on time, and he is self-sustained, and he can make decisions under stress, which is all very similar to the cowboy world. But the thing with it is that we haven't been doing this our whole life. So we're not that good at the thing. It's like some guys are very good at it, but we've got drive and heart. And there's so many members of the old school cowboy community that have owned ranches for 5 generations in Montana that are like, I will hire you and your guys any day. And we're like, well, damn. And so it's been opening doors and helping guys, because for the veteran equine programs that I get to participate in and give back to as a volunteer or a board member or as a paid employee, a lot of them, if any, have very poor follow-up, where afterwards you go and do it and it's like, now what? I go back to my house in Atlanta and I drink, or go back to work at fucking Chick-fil-A or whatever. So this is a way to keep guys that want to stay in, provide them opportunity with partnered ranches and organizations and otherwise, And so it's basically just kind of like a follow-up entity. Yeah, and I'm pretty proud of it, and I'm proud of the men that have chosen to align with it, the direction they're taking it on their own. And honestly, the only thing I did was start, like, give the community a label. That's it. The rest of it took off. And there's far smarter, far handier, far more experienced guys in that world than me. I was just the guy that had an idea one night, and it just took off. And the Warfighter Cowboy Union, and I'm proud of it. I went out to a barn dance the other night in Big Timber, Montana, and about 5 guys at that, like, I didn't know anybody. I went with a dear friend from Livingston, and I had 5 guys come out of the crowd and ask me, like, hey, you're that guy. And I used to get that a lot from being an operator. Like, I go to the Cook County Saloon in Edmonton to go hang out with a buddy who's a bouncer. And I get young veterans at the Edmonton Garrison that come up and they're like, hey, you used to be that SF guy. I was like, yeah, that was me. And that effect is happening again down here in the cowboy world. So I maintain, this is kind of a joke, man. I'm kind of the Forrest Gump of the cowboy. Because I'm kind of a dummy. I'm not good at any of it, but I just get in rooms with people by fate and happenstance. And the music world, my music stuff is kind of taken off. Well, not taken off. I mean, it's taken off enough for me, especially in a country where I'm not from. And same thing. I'm like kind of the Forrest Gump of the music, the cowboy singer music world too.
That's awesome. But again, sometimes an organization needs the Forrest Gump to get shit going. I mean, you know,
I'll be that guy.
And exactly. Right. And I mean, from just that simple thing, now you've created something that it's drawing in people, like, you know, I was talking earlier, that it gives them that bit of that purpose. Maybe they're feeling lost in that moment of, what do I do next? I had this identity, this lifestyle that I put everything into. Now I'm not, you know, firefighter, cop, soldier, pick something like that. And then they're lost. And, you know, you get guys that are very type A or very driven, and now they get self-destructive because, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? No, now I'm a piece of shit because I don't have this plan or this goal. So little things like that, you know, all of a sudden they go, you know what? Maybe I can ride a horse. Maybe the cowboy lifestyle is my thing, or it could be anything, but sometimes it just takes that person trying something a little scary that they had no idea about. I mean, like you said, you had no idea really how to be a cowboy. You didn't grow up being it, but that passion and many things that, you know, you liked within the military camaraderie and those things like that, you found it within another community.
Yeah.
So
there is 2 things on that you mentioned. One, there's a book that if listeners are interested in reading something, and the premise is Sebastian Younger wanted to figure out why it is that soldiers that really didn't like war, but why did they miss it? And the book is called Tribe, and it's not a long read. And he had discerned from some case study and some research stuff that even like guys like mountain men that would come into this country in the 1800s during the Lewis and Clark 1803 across trying to get the way to the Pacific through the Missouri, they would not those guys specifically, but guys from like fur outfits, they would get up in the morning or in the Civil War, and, you know, Smith wouldn't be in his tent, and he left his uniform and he went and he lived with natives. And it was not because he wanted to go and not deserting, but there's elements of community and tribe that exist in some cultures that we are meant viscerally and primarily to be a part of. The military is one of them. When you are accountable to the man left and right of you, regardless if you're a truck driver in Afghanistan or a clerk in Iraq or an SF guy in wherever, you are a part of a tribe. And that is why people go to war. Do you think anybody goes to war for Justin Trudeau? Do you think anybody goes to war for any of these other people? Like, do you think they went to war for, did I actually think the Taliban were going to come to North America and harm my mom and dad? No, I didn't. I went because I wanted to be a part of a tribe that did something great. And I wanted a piece of that little thing. I just wanted to be a part of it. I had this thing where I got this award one year, man, and I cut it up. And I gave pieces of the award. It was like a cool coin, like a big dinner plate looking thing. And I gave it to all my friends because I was like, I didn't do this for me. I did this for the guys that were here, and you guys all have a piece of this. And much like the cowboy thing. Like, you get to be a part of something. That's more important than doing the actual thing, is being a part of it. And when you're a part of it, it doesn't matter that you're bad or that you're green or that you're learning or you're young or that you're old or whatever. You're just a part of a culture and a community. And the other thing I need to mention is, because like I give you like, hey man, what do you do? And all this. One thing I don't actually call myself is a cowboy. That is a term that you can't call yourself. You can't call yourself tough. Can't call yourself smart. Can't call yourself a badass, right? You can't call yourself a cowboy. Those are honors bestowed on you by people that you respect. And the day I earned my spurs, which is the thing in cowboy culture, is you don't just show up at an outfit wearing spurs, especially if it's not your horse. Because that is it can be a very aggressive thing to do to an animal if you don't know how to ride and it's not your animal. But one of the things that'll happen through your, a rite of passage in that community is at some point, someone who knows more than you will give you theirs.
Thanks for your time. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help grow the show. And remember, get back up.